Welcome back, everyone, to the Disaster Tough podcast, where we share insights into the big plays and right calls of leadership. We dive deep into the stories, lessons learned, and ideas that will help you in the field. Let's go. Welcome back to the Disaster Tough podcast. I'm your host, John Scardina. I am so excited for this week's episode. As you know, every week we try to talk with people from different perspectives and understanding and aspects of the field of emergency management. And this week is no different than any of the previous weeks where we have somebody special on. Brian, he's the director of emergency management for the University of Tennessee. I was there last year with the Dense Urban Terrain exercise in Nashville. Shout out to Task Force 46 and everybody who participated in that. Exercise is important. Reaching out to the community is important. Interoperability is important. We'll talk about all those things. But without any further ado, I'll welcome Brian to the show. Brian, how you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, John. I'm really excited. I'm excited to be here today.
Hey, you know what? I'm excited too. So you can say we're excited, you know?
Yeah.
So let's talk about you. You're a Marine, and then you got into EM. Can you talk a little bit more about your experience for us?
Yeah, sure. So, I decided it was time to retire from the Marine Corps. I was at that point where I was deciding, do I stay and just do this for the rest of my life, or do I try to pick up a second career? And for multitude of reasons, I decided, hey, I'm going to try to start a second career. I'd been stationed in Knoxville at the Reserve Center as the inspector instructor and really fell in love with the people in the area. So I was looking specifically to get back to Knoxville. Yes. And there was a job opened up at the University of Tennessee. And I was looking for something that I could be passionate about. I didn't want to get into, go from something like being a Marine to being in a setting that I was just working, a job. I needed the mission, and I really love the higher ed mission. So I applied and was very fortunate, thanks to my first boss who took a chance on me and hired me. I appreciate that. But when I got to the University of Tennessee, the job wasn't emergency management. I was actually the director of special events for the UT system. But because of my background, each state entity has to have an emergency services coordinator assigned to TEMA, the state, Tennessee Emergency Management Agency. So they're like, oh, yeah, this guy, let's get this former Marine, send him to TEMA. And I started learning everything I could about emergency management. Having a operations and logistic background helps a lot from the military, but there's just a ton to learn. So I started going to every class and every meeting I could, and I just found it fit me so much better than the job they hired me for. So the universe, as my role of as the ESC, the Emergency Service Coordinator, I was trying to get the campuses to raise their game a little in emergency management. And I guess I created my own job because I pushed hard enough that Knoxville said they needed a full-time emergency manager. I was the first full-time emergency manager at Knoxville. It was a partial job for somebody prior to me, but he had a degree in emergency management. But he knew he only was spending 10% of his time out. He knew he couldn't ever get where he wanted it to be. So he created the position and I applied and been here ever since. Happy as can be.
It's funny how things come together, right? Like timing is luck is another important thing. But, for me, and I'm just going to reference this very quickly because I think I've talked about this before on the podcast. When I was in DC, the full-time job that I had, before that, we had a team of 5 technically that were all hired around the same time. But before that, it was only one person duties as assigned. He could only, 10% kind of thing. And then it grew into a team. That timing was critical. However, if I hadn't done all the things required to be able to do the job, I wouldn't have been able to get the job. I think sometimes I talk to people who are listeners of the show who reach out and say, hey, I'm looking for this better job. I'm looking for this thing. And I'll start asking them some kind of the basics, and they want to jump that next ring without really doing the work. From a guy who has obviously been doing the work and be able to take the next step to the next step. What kind of perspective do you have on leadership from somebody who wants to get up to the next ring in their career?
Yes, there's so many things. Honestly, this comes up on your podcast a lot, and I agree with all the things about, making sure you have the right credentials and volunteering and getting experience where you can. I agree with all those. I would add to that, grow where you're planted. So if you're in a position, there's always a need for some kind of preparedness work, even if there's not somebody labeled as the emergency manager. And if you take that on, you'll be more valuable to your organization, and you'll get experience along the way, which will help prepare you for that next job.
The L3 Harris Extreme 400P radio solves problems and is specifically designed for emergency services. How do we know? We field tested it with medical, urban search and rescue, and collapse and confined structures. This radio is amazingly tough. Check out the L3 Harris Extreme 400P radio at l3harris.com right now. How do you spell Doberman Emergency Management? EOP, OEP, HVA, HMP, Thyra, TTX, Drone, PDA. Whenever you need an expert, Doberman Emergency Management field experts are there for support. Contact an expert at DobermanEMG.com today.
CBRNE Convergence, the world's largest conference for the non-conventional threat, is heading back to Orlando between October 28th and 30th, 2024. With 3 days of workshops, lectures, and interactive sessions delivered by speakers from around the world on the latest issues and approaches to CBRNE and hazmat. Make sure to claim your early bird discount by registering now at cbrneworld.com/event/Orlando.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask you a question that I get a lot, and I'm hoping you have the same answer as I do. When I suggest people like, hey, put yourself out there, do some of this work, they'll respond with, well, they're not going to pay me to do the extra stuff. What would you say to that?
You have to put in the time. So if you really want that, you have a job to do, the job they hired you to do. Listen, right now, today, I'm doing things that are not emergency management for my organization because I want to be valuable to my organization. And being a good partner helps me be a better emergency manager. You have to go the extra mile. If you want to move up, you want the big jobs, you have to go the extra mile. You have to show people that you're willing to work for it.
Yeah, I say the same thing. Bare minimum is not good enough for leaders, right? Like when we start to have a mentality of, let me look at my PD, my position description, and check the box to see if I'm doing this, and it's, 4:59, let me pack up, make sure I get out of here by 5 p.m. every day. Those kind of mentality, I don't think people realize how obvious it is to other people that they're not a leader. They're not somebody who wants to take it. Now, that's different than somebody who's getting burned out trying to do everything with no recognition. Totally different scenario.
Yeah.
What I'm just talking about, and I think what you're explaining, is everybody has to pay their dues. And if you really want to be great, then you have to do things that make you great and not the bare minimum. Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, a way of saying that is you got to dress for the job you want, not the job you have. And I'm not talking about how you dress. I mean, you need to carry yourself as a leader before you get promoted to being a leader.
I once saw that same phrase. It says, dress for the job you want, not the job you have. And then it had somebody in a Batman costume saying, well, now I'm in front of HR, trying to explain,
That's
but
good.
The reality is it's true. Like, I've never really been a fan of the phrase fake it till you make it. It feels like a kind of a negative way, but the reality is, like, step up. If you step up, most of the time people will notice. I know that Pete Gaynor said that several times on the show. Like, somebody always notices, and they noticed in your career, right? I mean, you got hired for special events and somebody noticed you.
Absolutely. I mean, I as you said it, it feels a lot like luck sometimes, but I was ready for that opportunity. When it came my way, and I had to interview with everybody else, and I interviewed with people who had a lot more experience than me, but they saw in me that I was ready to take a program from zero to the level it needed to be. And that was as important as the technical skills.
Absolutely. The fact that you're like mission driven, right? I mean, everybody that I know that I like working with is always mission driven, to be honest. It's more fun to be around people who have a passion for that and can put it in those kind of world. From a guy who has developed the program, though, I'm just shifting here a little bit. Tell us about the Tennessee program. So you're the director. What's your staff look like? What are the projects that you guys are focusing on? What's it like over there?
Yeah, so we have two staff. So it's me and two other people, two planners. We sort of divide and conquer a lot, and then there's things we work together on that's just a big lift. So I do the director level work. We have a senior planner who does sort of the high level planning efforts, and our most junior member is focused on outreach and training. But we all do a little of everything. We currently, it's August, so we're getting into football really heavy. We've been planning all summer.
You're part of a new league, right? You're part of a new league now, right?
Yeah. I suppose you could. I think I look at it as that league. Our league got bigger. It's always been our league.
Yeah, that's true.
So, we are, I joke about this a lot. I spend a lot of my time personally facilitating between departments, making sure that they are prepared and can work together in the worst possible conditions. I spend a lot of time on sales and marketing. I'm out there selling preparedness to departments, to people who have full-time jobs. We have I'd say our program's pretty mature. We have all the pieces in place. We maintain a lot of those pieces. And then because of my personality, whenever there's any space, I look for something new to do. We just launched a new mandatory training program for all staff. Very basic shelter, evacuate, active shooter. That was getting mandatory training at a university is a hard sell. So I'm pretty proud of that.
That's huge, actually.
We just transitioned this is a pretty big lift too. We just transitioned from a traditional, I say traditional, but I almost do nothing traditional, an ICS-like EOC to more of an incident management team concept.
Interesting.
Based on the lessons I learned in COVID, we were very successful and the EOC worked, but there was parts of it that were bothering me. I felt like it was a little unwieldy. Yeah. There were so many people, and keeping that many people trained was super difficult when they have full-time jobs. So I went to an 0305 class for Type 3 incident management teams, and actually was reading at the same time Team of Teams by Stanley McChrystal.
Mm-hmm.
And the two things just overlapped in my head. And I was sitting here going, 0305 incident management team of teams. How do you get small team success on the scale of the University of Tennessee?
Yeah.
And I merged those two things together and built an incident management team of some of our key leadership here.
Yes.
And we train them quarterly, but the EOC is come as who you are. So we bring in department reps who are subject matter experts in their field, and they just have to come be themselves. I don't have to train them. They come, they're housing. They're the provost. They're the registrar. And we haven't had to really execute it yet, knock on wood. But I'm really confident it feels like a much better approach for us. I know an incident management team at a college probably sounds strange.
No.
But the truth of our reality is most emergencies are handled by responders and over before I'm ever involved. And then there's sort of an in-between level where there might be some cross-coordination between a few departments. But the full activation of the campus capability means there's no real scene. The campus is the scene. So having an incident command post and an EOC doesn't make sense for us most of the time. Yeah. So we combined those into this IMT idea.
Okay, first of all, I love the IMT idea. So hats off to you. I just had Denise Wisman on here from ASU, and she was in the same mindset that, I have to remind a lot of people in this, and this is like a great way to segue into that, is people forget that like FEMA, everything that's designed for FEMA, all that training is so that FEMA as a federal agency can operate in a disaster. Like I was FEMA, National IMAT, I get it, the whole deal. But I've also worked at hospitals, and, a lot of our clients are either universities, stadiums, national laboratories. That system doesn't fit, right? I mean, it's not a federal agency responding, and so you have to change that. And so you can take elements, right? The IMT element is much better than trying to take some massive system and trying to change that. What I would say at the university level is getting buy-in. You mentioned buy-in. Oh my gosh. I was at a university, I won't say which one, and all we wanted to do was to be able to help change from physical keys to key cards to help people log in so we can lock down buildings a little bit easier. And the amount of pushback of Big Brother checking when I'm going to clock in and when I'm not going to clock out, oh my gosh, what a nightmare. So the fact that you're able to get buy-in there is huge. It shows how influential you are, and we should talk about that. I have a very specific question for you. Okay. So I don't know if you've heard of dynamic populations, but at dynamic populations, we teach security, evacuations, mass care, medical transport and triage, public relations, and CBRN, if I hadn't mentioned that one. So we take these 6 competencies, and it's 3 days of just go, go, go. It's really fun. But one of the vignettes that we do, because we use stadiums typically, is we talk about specifically the University of Tennessee. And
really?
You guys, like Ohio State and a few other stadiums, has a history of people rushing the field at big games.
Yes.
From an emergency management, cross-security world, planning for those events and executing safety. Now, that might still mean people are running on the field. What is best practice that you guys have found that you can share with other people?
Oh, wow. I love this question.
Good.
So,
it's very specific.
It's very specific. So we have a system in place for all of football that this is one possible response. So our command post EOC for football, they're already set to help manage that, to include the pre-event briefings of all the other people that are involved. So we have a field rush plan, and I think some of the best practices that come out of that, I think engaging early to try to prevent, we actually, it might not look like it on TV, but we actually do try to prevent it. So, you can do things like employ someone with a camera.
Yes.
We use our student life people. We have a tiered response model that we use all the time. And the cop is never the first person to engage. It's always a student life, an administrator, an usher, right? So we try to go there first. And the student life people are all in the student section. And we'll talk to them. They'll go talk to them and say, hey, don't do it. After the game, we always bring the team to them. So the team always goes over to the student section and celebrates with them. And that's the idea there, is to not have them have a need to go on the field.
Yeah.
But we also keeping the aisles clear is a best practice. If you let people come from upper sections and fill the aisles in the lower sections, you're going to lose the field. So fourth quarter, we enforce that pretty hard. You can't be in the aisles. You can't stand in the aisles. It's also harder to get over the benches if you don't have an aisle. So we do that. But once they decide to go, we let it happen. It's unsafe to try to stop them.
At one point, that's what I figured too. At one point, you just have to let it run its course. That was a good pun for you. I was at the Napoli versus Barcelona game in Italy earlier this year. I've always wanted to go see a game in Europe, and I happened to be over there for some work and some other stuff. So I went to a game, and they have a literal moat around the pitch. So if you guys want to dig like a 15-foot moat, then that's one best practice, I guess. But I don't get nervous very often. And I wasn't nervous. I was having a good time. But in terms of like nowhere to go, there was literally nowhere to go. They fill up all the aisles. They pack it into there as tight as possible. If anything ever happens, crowd crush immediately. Somebody's getting hurt. How do you guys, because with that many people running onto the field, do you have a system in place where you're able to identify quickly or at least get responders there quickly? I know this is specific, but I'm just hyper curious about it.
Yeah, that's okay. So we already have part of our fourth quarter plan is we bring in a lot of the police who had perimeter jobs and we bring them on field level. So we have a pretty good presence right then. But if they're going to take the field, we also have 3 very large exit tunnels at field level. And we usually just let them have their fun, do what they're going to do. And then at some point we'll say, okay, it's time to go. And we just kind of let them and direct them to those tunnels and put them straight out on the street.
That's awesome.
You can go from field level straight out on the street. Here's a good, funny story for you. When they got the goalposts, we knew that was going to happen too. I have to say it's a tradition I'm not sure I understand, but okay. I accept it's going to happen and they're going to do it. So, but they took one of them out the tunnel. They're pretty big. They got one in half and took it out the tunnel. They couldn't get the other one in half, so they started taking it up the stands. That's when we drew the line. Yeah. So that's when it was no longer funny. And we said, the officers in the stands, the command post issued an order, said, under no circumstances does that get above the tunnel, because we didn't want that going over the edge of the stadium.
Yeah.
So that was a hard law enforcement intervention.
Wild.
If you ever look up the video, there's a hilarious video online of a guy saying he's all excited, Tennessee fan, we beat Alabama, we won. And then he cuts away and he comes back. He says, the goalposts are coming down. We're got the goalposts. And he says, comes back out, we're taking the goalposts out of the stadium. And then you hear an officer, a really clever move, just dry fires a taser next to his leg. So he hears this out. He goes, somebody just got tased. Never mind. I'm out of here. And I love that video. That very fast thinking by the officer.
In the emergency management response for dynamic populations course, you'll master the art of managing large, diverse populations, like those at schools, hospitals, amusement parks, or stadiums. These scenarios demand rapid, adaptable responses where command and control, evacuation, mass care, medical transport and triage, public messaging, and counter-Sebring considerations are all put to the test. From October 22nd through 24th in Pueblo, Colorado, you'll dive into DIPOP training with the capstone Hot Mess Express exercise, taking on the role of an emergency manager as you lead your organization through chaos of a catastrophic train derailment. This high-intensity experience will push your skills to the limit as you work to protect and coordinate these ever-changing populations. Get ready to elevate your readiness in the most complex dynamic environments with DIPOP 2024. Class size is limited. Sign up today at thereadinesslab.com. Yeah, probably, mitigated such a big issue there. That's so... crowd dynamics and crowd psychology is fascinating to me. I love researching it. Looking at different aspects, and so I appreciate you sharing your experience. I'm sure you have a lot more. When we're talking about disaster, sometimes because of again, using the word traditional, I don't know how traditional it is, but traditional EM, they think hurricanes, wildfires, mass flooding. If you're in schools, you might be thinking active shooter, active assailant. It gets a little bit more into man-made stuff. From either perspective, I think people forget the crowd dynamic. That crowd can be dispersed, like, in a community going into a shelter, or it can be packed into a stadium like that. And we learned, especially what happened in Hurricane Katrina, keeping people in a stadium for a long period of time.
Yeah.
From your perspective, director of a university and EM, what does emergency management need to start doing in order to take our field to the next level?
So I think we have to professionalize.
100% agree.
I'm a guy who came from the military with not any traditional emergency management experience, but I educated myself along the way, and it really, I embarrassed to admit, I have not gotten the CEM certification.
No, you don't need one. I don't either. Forget it.
You know,
I let everybody listening to this right now. Who cares about this? Anyways, I'm going to get beat up for that one, but.
Yeah, I support it from the perspective of the professionalizing, and at least, I do have the certified sports security professional from NCS4.
Did you go this year?
I did not make it this year. The timing didn't work out.
I went this year. It was pretty good. Yeah.
I try to go. So it's really, there's so many places you can't throw a stick without being able to professionally develop yourself, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's always opportunities. For me, it's actually timing and picking the right ones. There's always plenty of opportunities out there. And I have a decent chunk in my budget for my people to go to conferences and go to training.
Awesome.
I think it's super important.
We'll see you at Dive Up.
I was looking at it.
You should. We'll talk about it afterwards. But the reality is, it's like you're always learning, and the professionalization of the field. I could talk about that forever. I'm gonna be the anti guy again, because I want to hear your answers, because I get this a lot.
Okay.
People are afraid of professionalizing their field because they're afraid that the pushback I get is, well, if you do that, then I can't navigate new problems somehow. They're afraid that new disasters that they will potentially could deal with. And my pushback on them is when they say stuff like that is, if you don't have a baseline, no one who is hiring you is knowing what they're hiring you for, right?
Right.
Military, wow, what an opposite of standards, professionalism, understanding you know what you're going to get when you get something. Emergency management can be all over the place.
And it is all over the place. I mean, so you said the fake it to make it. I have 40 years of imposter syndrome all the time. Every time I think I know a lot about emergency management, I run into something I don't know, and I'm like, wow, how did I not know this by now? But also, thanks to the Marine Corps, I have the confidence to say, I do know a lot, and I am professional, and I'll figure this out, and I'll get us through it.
Absolutely.
But I don't think not training or not professionalizing is the answer. That seems counterintuitive to me.
Same. Yes.
Having the education doesn't make you successful, but having the education and combining that with other skills and experience will make you successful.
Yes.
I don't know why you wouldn't want to fill your toolkit up with as much as you can carry.
I love that. I love that all the way. Sorry, I don't want to cut you off. I mean, the reality is part of the reason why I haven't gotten the CEM, and hopefully I've been doing this for 4 years so I don't lose all my subscribers today. But I love the idea of IAEM as a social club. And I don't mean that any disrespect. I think it's a great way for people to go and share ideas and collaborate. But a certified emergency manager, certified in what? Because we say emergency management, but if you look up the definition, it's 3 paragraphs long. And the other thing is that really grinds my gears is the certification is based off of the free FEMA courses that you can get. And if I wanted to be part of the association as a social thing, 100% all for it. But if I can get that same learning material for free, then I think that's something different. I also have 2 degrees in emergency management. I've been doing the job for a while. So no discredit to anybody who's gotten their CEM. I think that's awesome that they're part of something special. But I don't think that it's going to sound really harsh. I don't know if that's actually professionalizing the field. I do know that the idea of creating a standard is great.
Yeah.
Higher ed is one way to do it. Like a bar association would be a great way to do it. But I don't know if IAEM is there yet. I do hope that they can get there. Maybe.
I think it could be part of the part of what makes up professionalizing.
Absolutely.
It's not a whole thing. I think it shows a level of commitment to the profession that you would go through the certification process.
I love that idea.
Similar to how a bachelor's degree demonstrates a level of commitment to learning and getting certain skill sets, even though you're not getting technically trained for a profession. I would look at it that way.
Yeah, that's a good way. And I've had many lengthy conversations with many of my CEM friends about this. And so they're like, what are you doing? Stop being an idiot. Get your CEM. But, and I hear them, and it's not black and white for me. There's a lot of like pros and cons. And the reality is I do agree with you and agree with that argument ultimately is if you're showing commitment to something and it can be added to something else, great.
Right.
And like I go to the conference. I think there's lots of great things about IEM and the CEM process. But there's always these different levels there. For looking for the sake of time here, we could probably talk about standardization forever.
Yeah.
I always end the podcast basically in the same way. If somebody's getting into the field of emergency management, what would you tell them to help them be successful?
I'd say have an open mind, never stop learning, don't pass up an opportunity to learn, and be flexible. So emergency management is a wide field. Maybe the job you're looking at as a county EM is not in your reach right now, but there's other jobs that are similar functions in business and higher ed. Everybody needs this function. Take those jobs, work until you can qualify for that county EM job or that FEMA job you're looking for, and be humble. I think you have to be humble. One of the things I see about my peers getting out of the military is sometimes they have to get a smack of humble to make it, to transition into that civilian life. I feel like there's a bit of that in emergency management too. I haven't had the huge national level response. I'm a local guy. I've always kind of been a local guy, but I have successfully carried this university through some emergencies, not alone. I don't want to sound like brag. Thousands of people got us through that. But as an emergency manager, my role, I got us through that. But I still have to be humble today and understand, tomorrow could be different. What we're going to face tomorrow will be different. And I still need all those people who came to the table last time to come to the table again and help us through it. So that was long-winded. Be humble, learn, keep learning, and don't be too proud to admit that you're not ready for that job or you don't have the qualifications for that. Go get them. Go get the qualifications so that when they pick up your resume, it matches the PDQ and they're like, oh, we have to talk to this person.
Yeah, you want to be attractive on a resume, 100%. You mentioned 4 things that I got. Open-minded, always learning, be flexible, be humble. That's right after I said I didn't want to get my CEM. So now I should be open-minded, keep learning. Seriously, though, Brian, I agree with you 100%. And honestly, that's like the mic drop moment. If not just in our field, but the world in general, if everybody could just be a little more open-minded and a little more humble, be willing to learn, a little more flexible, a lot of problems would go away. And it's great for advice for the field. You mentioned earlier about, kind of putting in your dues and getting to work and achieving greatness. I think being open-minded, being teachable, being humble is a great way to do it. I get humbled literally every single week because I get to interview great people on the podcast. I'm like, hey, teach me something new. And it's a great way for me to remember that there's always something new to learn. And I certainly learned from you today. So thanks again for coming on.
Well, thank you for what you do, because I have that same experience every week. And I've been forced to think more deeply about things I held an opinion on and, listen to the podcast. I'm like, I might need to revisit that again.
Well, you're a good man for it. And hopefully I get to see you die pop in the future. And with that, everybody who's listening in, if you got something out of this podcast, if you're learning about emergency management for universities especially, give us that 5-star rating and subscribe like we always ask for. And if you have a question for Brian specifically, you can reach out to us at contact@thereadinesslab.com. We'll forward it on to him. If you have something for the public, like something you've learned that has helped you in your career, please don't blast me for not having my CEM, but put it on social media, and we'll see you for the next one. Peace.